All right, everybody. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of In Liberty and Health. First stream of the year. So I hope everybody had a great holidays, Christmas, whatever you worship, whatever you do. Hopefully that was absolutely fantastic for you. And hopefully you enjoyed your New Year's Eve with people you love. And hopefully it was awesome for you. I know my wife and I sat downstairs and watched Stranger Things, and I had 2 glasses of Metallica's Blackened Whiskey, which was absolutely fantastic. And then I went to bed, woke up with a headache, and now here we are. And we're going to talk about the world just blowing up around us, or maybe not blowing up around us. I brought somebody absolutely fantastic with me today who's way, 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 way more informed than me on all this stuff. And of course, I depend on him quite a bit for all my reporting. So make sure you go to all the links below where you can find him, everything I've got going on, everything he's got going on. And we're going to talk about the predictions for the future and how everything's kind of going right now. There's a lot to discuss. So like I said, I brought somebody perfect with me for it. So without further ado, let's get into it. And welcome back to the show, my dear friend, Dave DeCamp. How you doing, man?
I'm good, Kyle. Happy New Year. Today is the first day of the year.
Yeah, it feels kind of weird to say it's 2026. It doesn't feel real. I swear to God, 2025 just like gone.
Yeah. I'm going to screw it up with my show and my writing. I'm definitely going to be using the wrong year for a little while.
Yeah, I write state inspection stickers at work, and I know for a bit there I kept trying to put 24, and then I have to scribble it out and put a 5, or try to like make a 4 look like a 5. But thankfully my handwriting's bad enough that I could kind of cover it up. So yeah, man, last couple weeks have been kind of exciting. So I kind of wanted to start pretty broad, I guess, and then we'll kind of narrow into a few different topics. But one thing that you've discussed quite a bit on your show, and I discussed it a little bit on Twitter and a little bit on my show, it's just kind of the neutralization of the anti-war rights perspective on Ukraine, because it seems like the war is actually, the US is more involved than it was under Biden at this point, and there's just radio silence out of the right today. So what's kind of the latest with Ukraine, and where do you think it's going this year?
Yeah. So, right. All that we've seen happening on the peace front is just talks and talks and talks and talks and more talks. And then these guys talk and those guys talk. But
Mhm.
we haven't, as far as I can tell, gotten any closer to a peace deal. Because it just doesn't seem like Trump is really willing to put the pressure on Ukraine that he needs to. And the war just goes on every day. It's fighting across the front. There's Russian drones and missiles hitting Ukraine. Ukraine's firing a lot of drones into Russia now. And as you said, there's more U.S. support for these attacks inside Russia, specifically helping them target energy infrastructure.
Mhm.
And, one thing we've seen with Russia, with Putin, is that they're not just quitting the peace talks. They're keeping things cordial with Trump. It seems like they just want to maintain kind of a relationship with the U.S. where they can call Trump if something escalates or something happens. But if you look at what, we started with these peace talks. There was like a leaked peace deal that apparently the U.S. drew up with some input from Russia. And, there were some things in there that Russia probably wouldn't have gone for. But for the most part, it was a workable framework. And that's basically what Russia said as well. Of course, the media treated it like it was completely one-sided on Russia's side, but that really was not the case. But then, Marco Rubio started negotiating with Ukraine on to change it, and now it's completely changed. And Ukraine is still not saying that they're not going to cede any territory in the Donbass, which is a key Russian demand. And now, according to U.S. and Ukrainian officials, the U.S. is willing to give Ukraine a NATO Article 5 style security guarantee. And this is, again, just something that like Russia's just not going to go for. I mean, unless I really don't think I'm wrong. Again, I think what we see from Russia is just them keeping things cordial, because again, they're not just saying, all right, this isn't happening. They're still continuing the talks. But, you have all these European countries, the UK, France, saying they're going to send troops to Ukraine, even though Russia has said over and over and over again that they would never accept that. And that's just the reality, however you feel about it. And Putin has made clear he's willing to continue the war until he achieves his goals. yet they still, so we've just seen all these talks between Ukrainian officials and US officials and European officials, and then you see the reports in the media like, oh, they've made agreements on the Ukraine peace deal, but Russia hasn't been involved in these talks at all. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, it really doesn't look like this is going anywhere. And you have Zelensky saying that Trump is even discussing the possibility of sending US troops to Ukraine.
Mhm.
According to the Polish prime minister, they already agreed to that. So I don't know what happened, because Witkoff has been involved with this stuff. And it did seem like, based on what he was saying and based on a leaked conversation that he had with his Russian counterpart, which he got a lot of heat for, but that's like what his job is. He's supposed to be a
Yeah.
diplomat. But based on that, it seemed like he knew what was really necessary to get a peace deal here. And you even see Trump, he just met with Zelensky, and he said that they still haven't made an agreement on the territory. And Trump is speaking to reporters, and he's like, oh, I say you got to give up the land. You're going to lose it anyway. So why keep fighting and lose, another 10,000 people when you're going to, well, if that's what you say, why are you still supporting this war? Why are you still sending the weapons? And so it's just frustrating. And as you said, as I've been talking about, there really is like, if there was even like a hint of Biden discussing a NATO security guarantee for Ukraine, or sending troops, or this talk about give Tomahawk missiles, I mean, that hasn't happened, thank God. But if we would see so much outrage and opposition. We would see opposition in Congress among like 50 or so Republicans who are good
Mhm.
on the war during the Biden administration, like consistently. It would be a big deal. It would be a huge deal. But now we don't see it anywhere. It just, kind of has faded into the background. I mean, that's the nature of a conflict that's lasted this long. It's almost 4 years now.
Mhm.
Even myself, I have to admit, like, I'm focusing on other things because we're getting into all these new wars as well.
Mhm.
So we do kind of need to be focused on that. But yeah, this just goes on, and Zelensky, doesn't seem like he's under any real pressure here to make the deal, to make the concessions.
Yeah, I think you and I might have did a show shortly after. I know we did one in September. I was kind of looking through all my old shows that I did with you. And I know we've discussed this ad nauseum, but there was a whole lashing out of Trump and Zelensky, and everybody was saying, "Oh my God, look, he finally put him in his place." But ultimately, nothing came of that. Like Trump has completely caved at every single step of the way to Zelensky of all people. And like you said, it's kind of bizarre to me that basically they're trying to get Ukraine to join NATO in all but name only. That's the only thing that they will not do. But if you're willing to send troops and you're still supplying them all the weapons and aid and intelligence, I don't see how that's different from them joining NATO, which is essentially what started the war. Is just this constant flirting of bringing them into NATO and putting your military right on Russia's doorstep. And Trump has said allegedly in private that he knows Ukraine can't win, but then he says in public, I think they could take back territory, and you know what, we'll keep sending them aid and intelligence, and we'll even put troops there. Like, I don't. It's just like evidence of this multipolar world now, where Russia, like you said, they want to maintain a decent relationship with the United States, but they're not going to sit here and just keep playing this game. They'll have communications, everything, but they're not going to just be like, yeah, you know what, we're just going to we're going to take a haircut on the Ukraine deal. I think they don't really care about what the West wants. They're just going to do what they want to do. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And there was, as you mentioned, Trump, what was that, back in February of
Yeah,
2025 when Zelensky visited the Oval Office? I mean, that was it. That was your opportunity
right.
to end it, to say, make the deal. They made the deal then. Well, a lot less people would be dead. Trump was always saying, oh, I want the killing to stop. I want the killing to stop.
Mhm.
Which I thought was like the right rhetoric about this war. Some of the
Right.
things he said on the campaign trail, I was skeptical that he was going to actually end it, but it was one thing I was hoping he would actually do. But here we are, a year in now. But yeah, as he said, Russia and Putin, and they have the momentum on the battlefield, and they seem perfectly fine with continuing the war. Um, we are seeing, a lot of Ukrainian attacks inside Russia on energy infrastructure, and they claim that Ukraine fired a bunch of drones at Putin's residence, which could really escalate Russia's strikes on Ukraine. So I mean, it seems like things could just, the war could continue and just even escalate more.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm kind of I I hate to say I called it, but I think I did a podcast right before Trump was elected, or either that or like in the lame duck period where I said like, yeah, I think this war's probably going to go on for a little bit because when you had Keith Kellogg and Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, of those three, Steve Witkoff is the only good one, where Marco Rubio had supported aid to Ukraine pretty much the entire time until the end of Biden's term, and then Keith Kellogg of the America First Policy Institute had said for a long time that, like, hey, we want to send more arms to Ukraine to give them more negotiating leverage. But the truth is, there's no Trump was right when he said Ukraine doesn't have the cards, but for some reason Trump keeps trying to hand him like an ace in the hole, but it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and it seems like Trump, I remember at one point it seemed like he was really listening to Keith Kellogg, who I think he's stepping down now. He's leaving this month.
Yeah.
So who knows if that means anything. But yeah, I mean, Trump just didn't have the fortitude, the will to follow through on it.
Mhm.
And it goes on.
Yeah. So one thing that's kind of related would be the situation in Venezuela, because Russia has maintained obviously very good relationship with Venezuela, and they even had Wagner Group in Venezuela. As to what they were doing there or how much they're willing to kind of intervene on behalf of Venezuela, doesn't really seem that clear to me. But we haven't really, and I notice you seem skeptical over the whole situation of the alleged CIA strikes in Venezuela. And no one really seems to be talking about it. So um, I don't know what to make of that. And it doesn't seem like anybody that I follow really knows what to make of it either. So
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's weird. You had Trump. Part of the whole Venezuela thing has been a psyop aimed at basically trying to scare Maduro to get him to
Mhm.
flee, to get him to give up power. But we've also seen, kinetic military action with the boat strikes and very huge escalations enforcing a naval blockade, essentially, which I mean has always been considered an act of war. So this is kind of the logical next, not logical, but what you would expect to see as the next step is some kind of strikes. But it's just strange. I mean, still today, I don't know what happened, because first it started, Trump was on some radio show like WABC in New York, and he said, "Oh, I don't know if you read, but we blew up a big facility in Venezuela." And then people noticed it, and Trump was asked about it when he was with Netanyahu, and he said, "Oh yeah, we took out a drug facility." And then we saw all these reports, U.S. officials saying it was a CIA drone strike, but still really no details. I mean, does that mean it's an MQ-9 Reaper drone firing a Hellfire missile? I mean, that's a pretty big attack. Or
Mhm.
does that mean it's like a little small kamikaze drone, like these sabotage attacks? We see them a lot inside Iran, like Mossad style
Mhm.
sabotage attacks, because that's kind of a different story. Um, and as far as I've seen, I've been trying to look at, I mean, Venezuela, I haven't seen any official, uh, reaction from the government, whether, they haven't confirmed or denied it. I feel like if it wasn't true, they would have said so, or maybe. And then also from what we've seen, like local Venezuelan media, there was some explosion at a warehouse, but it was, inland. They're saying this was a port. The company that owns the warehouse denies that it was an attack or anything.
Mhm.
So I really don't know what happened.
Mhm.
But I mean, I wouldn't think they would just make it up. I mean, again, a lot of this has been a psyop, but the way that it came out, it seemed like Trump just kind of mentioned it on a radio show and then was asked about it and said, "Oh yeah, we did that." And then you have officials saying it was the CIA.
Mhm.
So at this point, I'm thinking it probably did happen, but what exactly it was, I have no no idea.
Mhm. Yeah, it really seems like what they're trying to do, and I'm curious your thoughts if you would agree, that they want to basically go right up to the brink of military action and either get Venezuela to do something so they can attack them, or they want to just create a huge fear campaign around Maduro, getting him to step down, because Trump knows that if he takes military action, offensive military action, that is, that it's going to be very unpopular because, once again, he's supposed to be the peace president. Big quotes. But it doesn't seem like that's going to work. So, you can only keep all these military assets down there for so long before it's kind of like, all right, well, you got to shit or get off the pot. And it seems like they don't know what they want to do. So, what do you think about kind of how long they can maintain this posture without doing anything?
Yeah, well, I think what we'll probably see is them to kind of continue escalating the blockade. So far, we've seen them seize 2 tankers near Venezuela, and they've been chasing a third one that like took off and is apparently in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Mhm.
And they're still like, according to the reports latest, they're still chasing it, but they haven't gotten it yet. But I could see them kind of continuing this for a few weeks, few months of the block, like maybe seizing more tankers. But I do think they probably are trying to provoke something here because, I mean, any other, like you put the shoe on the other foot, you can't really imagine it being an American because no country really has the capability to do this to
Mhm.
us. But like the economic sanctions, the blockade, flying planes and bombers right near Venezuela's coast, like constantly now, and saying that, oh yeah, we're doing covert CIA activity in the country. I mean, this is, we're at war with Venezuela essentially
Mhm.
already, and if Venezuela does anything, and I think they probably know this in Venezuela, if they do anything in response, that the US is going to just jump on that and use it as the justification to like launch a major airstrikes, try to take out Maduro.
Mhm.
So I mean, maybe there's some more talks going on behind the scenes, but it doesn't seem like they're gonna change course here. And the strategy is, and I'm sure this is what Marco Rubio has been telling Trump, and what the Venezuelan opposition has been telling Rubio is like, all right, increase the bounty on him. Somebody's gonna turn on him and kill him inside Venezuela. All right, increase the military activity. We'll start bombing boats near Venezuela. Let's start seizing tankers. Let's say we're gonna bomb them, but then not. Let's just keep threatening him. Eventually, he's gonna step down. But it hasn't happened. So I just assume they're gonna go to the next escalation, and maybe they're gonna lean on this covert activity. I mean, again, they're already claiming that they did a CIA drone strike, so maybe they'll do more of that, or I don't know. I kind of just see the escalations continuing. But I think this year, we're talking about what's going to happen this year. I think we could end up in a full blown war with Venezuela. And what would that look like exactly? I don't know. Would they send in troops, probably capture some bases and things? Because they have like these islands where they have naval bases. I could see them like trying to capture them and maybe some other things, along the coast. But I don't see like a full scale invasion. I would see a lot of airstrikes to try to take out Maduro and like his inner circle, which of course would just be a disaster. I mean, there's just so many risks you're taking there.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because I think you and I are both probably in the position like if you continue these interventions, which I want to talk about Somalia in a little bit because obviously there's a lot of talk about Somalia and Somaliland. If you continue this military campaign against Venezuela, I mean, you're just going to create the incentive for more people to leave the country, but also you're kind of creating the rally around the flag effect, which both these things from the Trump administration's perspective are exactly what they don't want, but they seem just full steam ahead on kind of making the situation worse when really I think the solution would be you just have to have better relations with Venezuela if you don't want them to go to China and you also want them to accept refugees because I know there was a point where they stopped accepting refugee flights, which is like, well, if you want to deport people from Venezuela that came to the US, then shouldn't you want good relations and shouldn't you want them to accept the flights? But it's like they're doing everything to create a problem and then use that problem as a justification to make more problems under the premise that they're fixing a problem, which is just like three shades of dumbassery.
Yeah, well, apparently they restarted they were deporting people to Venezuela all year basically.
Mhm.
And then Trump declared that the airspace of Venezuela is closed. So then
Mhm.
Venezuela said, "All right, I guess we're not taking any more deportation flights." But then the US government requested that they do another one and then they resumed. So
Mhm.
even through all of this, they're still taking those flights. And
Mhm.
then you see Trump always says this, the claim against Maduro is, "Oh, he flooded our country with all these people." Well, he's right now he's taken a lot of them back. I think they've returned about 15,000 people this year to
Mhm.
Venezuela. And then, so, and it's always shifting the justification. They're like, "Oh, he's a narco trafficker. He sent flooding our country with people. It's China. Oh, it's Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas." Like
Yeah.
they're just throwing all this stuff out there. It's like really pathetic that their attempt at war propaganda here.
Mhm.
Um, and even you talk about China, it's like, what are they doing with China? Oh, they're selling them oil. Oh man, the U.S. still sells China oil, like,
Mhm.
and why does Venezuela sell China oil? Because they're basically can't sell it to anybody else. except through Chevron to the U.S., which is still operating in Venezuela, even amid all this stuff, there's an American company still operating there. And, I'm not too confident in all of these reports that we've seen. There was one thing in the New York Times saying that Maduro offered, full access to American companies to Venezuela's resources, that he would cut ties with China, Russia, and Iran. I don't know if he's really offered all that. I think that could be part of the psyop, to try to get people to turn on him. But he's made it clear himself that he's willing to work with Trump, that he would be willing to do business with the U.S. So it's all, all that stuff is just BS. It's just this kind of regime change dream of the people Marco Rubio represents in Florida. It really is. Like, I actually think, even though they're talking about oil, Trump is claiming that they have oil and land that's ours, which is just complete nonsense. Based on, I think, because Hugo Chavez he nationalized some more oil projects when he took power. And some companies took the deal and stayed, like Chevron, but other companies didn't accept it and left and tried to sue them for like damages. And, ExxonMobil claims that the Venezuelan government owes them like a few $1 billion. They don't claim that the oil is theirs. Mm-hmm. The whole thing is just like, they're just lying through their teeth in like so many different ways. Mm-hmm. But I still think, even though oil is obviously a big part of it, that's kind of what I think how they're convincing Trump to do all this. But I think the driving force behind this is literally the political faction in Florida of Cuban, Venezuelan, expats, immigrants, children of immigrants who have this ideological desire to overthrow the government in Cuba, which they think they can, or they're Venezuelan and, they want Maduro out so they can go back. You see a lot of the people that go on the news shows agitating for this regime change. They're Venezuelans living in Florida. Mm-hmm. Who are like, oh yeah, we want you to overthrow the government so we can go back. And that was the same thing with the Cuban exiles. That's what they wanted the U.S. to do with Castro. And that's why there's still sanctions on Cuba. I mean, there's just no reason for us to keep a country 90 miles off our coast under an embargo. But it still is because of this political, the way our political system works. Like these ethnic groups, these, have, when they get together and lobby, they become very powerful.
Right. Impure Hunter had asked a few things. Did the tanker put on a Russian flag or something like that? I don't know about that, Dave. Maybe you do, but I know that like one of the things, kind of like we were outlining a little bit earlier, is that once again it's supposed to be a justification against China because supposedly China's super invested in Venezuela, but like the only evidence of that I see them really down in South America. Okay, they have trade relations with some of the countries down there. It's not like they have like like the relationship that the U.S. has with Israel. China just basically maintains good relations, and this is even more evidence by the fact that China hasn't done anything. Like they condemned the stealing the tankers and the blowing up of boats. But if like China was heavily invested there, don't you think they would be taking more action other than just a strongly worded letter?
Yeah. Well, I mean, China, that just going back to that tanker quick, they did apparently paint a Russian flag on the hull, I guess to claim Russian protection. But yeah. Mm-hmm. But with China, so do you remember with the Panama Canal stuff earlier this year?
Oh yeah, China owns the Panama Canal.
Yeah, and what it is that Chinese companies like manage or own parts of the ports, a few of the ports on the Panama Canal. Yeah. And I know in at least one case, like they just made them sell it to BlackRock or something. Like I forget exactly the details there, but that's what it was. Like Chinese companies involved in the ports. Mm-hmm. It just not anything like what they claimed. I mean, even in the US, like we have ports owned and operated, managed by foreign companies. Mm-hmm. Which is, maybe something we should reconsider. But this, the whole narrative, as you said, China doesn't have any sort of military footprint in South America. Russia does have a military relationship with Venezuela. They apparently sent them some new air defenses recently. Mm-hmm. But, there's not much beyond that. There's the rumors that Wagner sent some people there, but how much could a little team of mercenaries really do? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. Just again, they're just throwing whatever they can at, and at like what's her name, Maria Salazar. She's a Republican from Florida, and she's this born a child of Cuban exiles. She went on the news and she's like first off, they got all this oil. It's going to be great. We're going to get so much oil. Also, Maduro, everybody's there. Iran's there. North Korea's there. Russia's there. China's
It's
there. Hamas is
all the
there. Hezbollah's
boxes.
there. Literally all the boxes. And then she claims he's selling uranium
Mhm,
to Hamas.
mhm,
So, yeah, they're just really doing what they can to get this. And then you have that woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize, who's the Venezuelan opposition leader.
Marina Corina Machado, yeah.
Yeah, who's like wants her country to be invaded. That's the Peace
Mhm.
Prize winner. So the whole thing's just crazy.
Yeah, it's I remember watching that clip and it's like, wow, this lady must have like went to Sean Hannity and said, all right, what are all the boxes I need to check off to trigger the boomers? All right. Yeah, Hamas, Hezbollah, uranium, China, Russia, North Korea. All right. Is there anything else? No. Oh, narco trafficking. Got it. All right. And let's go. So
I do
speaking,
think I do remember. I think back in 2020, Iran, there's some kind of Iranian grocery stores open in Venezuela. So I guess we got to
mm,
bomb those.
yeah. Yeah, you can't have the anti-Semitic grocery stores down
Yeah.
there. So, kind of on that topic as well, the bombing of Nigeria. I covered it on my show on Sunday, so listeners go back and listen to that. I read a article from our mutual friend Jose Nino, who claims that he believes that this was largely on behalf of this growing faction of the global south that is, I shouldn't say growing faction, but like this want to get some parts of the global south to be pro-Israel because they probably want to box some of like the different season stuff there off for Israel to kind of let them be their hegemon over there in the region. And I keep hearing from all the plan trusters that all the wars in the Middle East are winding down and we're pulling out of the Middle East, but I see absolutely zero evidence of that. So, what do you make of the bombing in Nigeria? Why do you think it is? And what do you think the recognition of Somaliland means for the larger, the larger picture of the Middle East?
Yeah, Nigeria, I don't really know much about the Israel connection there. I
Mhm.
do believe, and I think it's clear that kind of we've seen this big push. You can tell when there's a lot of propaganda going out, like the Christian genocide narrative really just
Yeah.
blew up. And it was really literally people saying, oh, who cares? You're always talking about Israel. What about what's happening in Nigeria? And then
Mhm.
Ted Cruz and people like that really jumped on it. So, but they're claiming that they're bombing the country to protect Christians, which is just like total humanitarian intervention. No claim that it's of like strategic importance for the US or anything like that.
Mhm.
And I mean, just the way I understand the situation in Nigeria is a very big country. It's about half Muslim, about half Christian, and there's different conflicts. A lot of it is banditry, like criminals,
Mhm.
gangs that roll into towns and kidnap people for ransom and things. And then in the Northeast, you have ISIS and Boko Haram. And in the Northwest, you have this one bandit group that might be tied to ISIS that's like Islamist. And that's who it seems like they targeted with these airstrikes. We don't know if they actually killed any of them. We do know that at least two villages, missiles landed on two villages that had nothing to do with it. Thank God nobody was killed in those villages. But when it comes to like the Christian genocide narrative, there's a lot of attacks on churches in Nigeria. A lot of priests are kidnapped. A lot of Christians get killed in this violence. The thing is, as I said, it's like all different kind of people doing it for different reasons in central Nigeria, which seems to be, or like north central, which seems to be where like the violence is the worst. It's like groups of what they call herdsmen, Fulani herdsmen. Fulani is the ethnicity, and they're Muslim, and they attack. It's really a land dispute, but of course, it has like religious undertones because they're Muslim and the people they're attacking are Christian, and they do target churches a lot. Like it's something I've been aware of a while because I'm Catholic and I read Catholic media a lot. But the narrative that went out was basically that the Nigerian government is like committing a Christian genocide, which is just not true at all. And can you argue, especially with ISWAP and Boko Haram, like if they're trying to establish a little Islamic state and that involves killing all the Christians or forcing them to convert or whatever, could you say that that's a genocide? Probably, yeah. But is that? I don't know if that's exactly what's happening on the ground in the Northeast. I know a lot of Muslims get killed in that area just the day before the U.S. bombing. I think it was the day before, or maybe a different day. There was a suicide attack in a mosque in northeast Nigeria that killed 5 people. So I think this is kind of to appease. Why is Trump doing this? There's a few reasons. Obviously, Nigeria has resources, but I don't really see that because the government. We're an ally. We've been allied with the government for for a very long time. Is it to appease kind of this evangelical Zionist base of Trump's donor class? That could be related. So yeah, I don't really know exactly like if there's anything more nefarious than that. But when it comes to like the practicality of it, like, okay, if that's really what you want to do is protect the Christians, I cannot think of a worse prescription for that than a U.S. military intervention, especially if it's just like airstrikes.
Mhm.
Because as we saw, 2 villages had nothing to do with it. Missiles fell on them. Some homes were destroyed. I mean, again, thank God nobody was in them. If the USA is bombing Nigeria in the name of protecting the Christians and say Muslim civilians or any civilians get killed, isn't that just going to increase the animosity against the Christians? And it also seems like the ISIS affiliate ISWAP, the one in the Northwest, their statement when Trump initially threatened military intervention in Nigeria, they basically said, all right, this is part of our goal to overstretch the U.S. military, because they know that would help their recruitment, and everything. So, it's just very stupid, the whole thing. And I do know, some Christians in Nigeria support it, but others oppose it, including the Catholic bishop in the state that the U.S. bombed. He said
Mhm.
he came out against it. So, and then, it's become a new thing now. Like, if you're against the U.S. bombing Nigeria, oh, that means you support the Christian genocide, like the genocide of Nigerian Christians. It's just
Yeah.
so crazy how war propaganda just like it's like a switch sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's so crazy because like you said, there couldn't be a better way to just make the situation worse, and especially when you consider, like, the highly likelihood that you're hitting civilians in a, area with drone strikes. Like, I know Obama's drone strikes, and I think even Trump's too, were both, like, 90% plus civilian targets. So, if you're gonna kill these civilians, I mean, do you think that's gonna make the population less radical or more radical? The basic insurgent math kinda tells you that, well, it's gonna make people more radical, and it's gonna make them probably, like you said, join up with the ISIS affiliate there. And we always heard that Trump eliminated ISIS, but okay, well, why are we dealing with it now in Nigeria and now, Somalia? So I've covered Somalia a little bit on the show, and I know you've been very, very good about the coverage there. So I guess let's kind of pivot over to Somalia and Somaliland and the ongoing situation there. You had a long tweet about that. Do you want to hit on that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So Israel recognized Somaliland. It's kind of been big news.
Mhm.
And obviously, we know that Israel, they're not just doing that because they support the independence, that they've, there's obviously a reason behind it, why they want to do it.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a few reasons. One is that there's been reports that Somaliland has been in discussions with the U.S. and Israel about taking in Palestinians from Gaza, because Israel, of course, wants to cleanse Gaza of all the Palestinians. And then the other reason, too, is the location. If you look at Somaliland, right on the Gulf of Aden, right across from Yemen, I think Israel expects to be in more conflict with the Houthis in Yemen, because
Mhm.
they probably eventually plan to completely just break the Gaza ceasefire, which they've been violating. But I think their goal is obviously in the long term to restart things full scale. Um, and so that's part of the reason. And then the other thing is that the Abraham Accords, they know that this is a big thing for Trump. They want to expand the Abraham Accords, but no significant countries actually want to do it now because of what they've done in Gaza. So I think they could see Somaliland as a way to do that and make Trump happy. Um, but I don't see this as related to the U.S. bombing campaign, because the U.S. bombing campaign has been in support of the federal government in Somalia, which is against Somaliland independence. And also, they've also been supporting the Puntland government, which is a state to the east of Somaliland. And they quit the federal system last year. They haven't seceded or declared independence or anything like that. They quit the federal system because they're in a dispute with the government. But they, as far as I understand, they don't support like secession. They still want federalism under one Somalia, and they have territorial disputes with Somaliland. Somaliland claims, some of the territory they control. So the U.S. is supporting these two governments in Somalia that are against Somaliland independence. So I just don't think that it's related. And the U.S. is propping up the central government in Mogadishu was installed basically by the U.S., by Ethiopia and the U.S. and the African Union and the EU supporting the 2006 invasion of Somalia. And that's when the Al-Shabaab insurgency started. And we've been fighting them ever since. And then you had the ISIS affiliate pop up in 2015. It's the same theme that you've seen in other U.S. interventions. You're fighting one group, and then, there's another group we got to fight. And we're just launching. But so why is the U.S. bombing Somalia this year more than any other year ever in history? I mean, not even, they've blown like the record, according to my count, it's 127 airstrikes, which is more than double the previous annual record that Trump set back in 2019 at 63. But Biden and Obama and Bush did not come anywhere close to these numbers when it came to Somalia. So why is this happening? I think, and this isn't like, the answer that people want to hear, because it's not like very conspiratorial or anything. I think this is just a holdover of the war on terror and what we've seen with Trump's military interventions. And this is what Hegseth always says, we're going to hit hard and unleash our war fighters. We're not going to have, what does he call, politically correct rules of engagement?
Oh, yeah.
So when Trump came in, he did this in his first term too. He loosened the rules of engagement, giving military commanders basically more freedom to launch airstrikes. And that's why we've seen this increase. And Sebastian Gorka, who's on the White House National Security Council, he apparently was the one pushing for this escalation. And, I don't really see how Israel is a factor in this. On the other hand, in Puntland, the port city of Bosaso is also on the Gulf of Aden across from Yemen. And the UAE built a base there, and the U.S. military has been operating out of it. It's also, potentially for that strategic location when it comes to Yemen. But the U.S. also has a base in Djibouti, which is much closer to Yemen, and bases in Saudi Arabia and things. So, but there could be something related to that angle in Puntland and Bosaso. The UAE is also very involved in Somaliland, and they ship weapons to the RSF in Sudan through both Somaliland and Puntland. So there are some nefarious things happening. But when it comes to the bombing campaign, like, I just don't see how it's something more than just what it is that we see, that it's just an escalation of a 20-year plus war that's been a complete failure, that goes on because nobody knows about it, because nobody criticizes it, nobody's questioning it. There's no like conversation happening about it, so they can just bomb away.
Yeah, it's really crazy to think that Trump campaigns as the peace president, and I don't know how people still buy this up, because we got into a war with Iran, which I do want to pivot to here in a minute. And then just the bombing campaign in Somalia alone. I mean, in his first term and his second term, just all the drone strikes just get cranked way up. And it's always kind of boggled my mind when people bring up, oh, Obama was the bomber in chief. Like, he did all these drone strikes. I'm like, well, if you criticize Obama for that, I agree. Your criticism's correct. But like, Trump was way worse in both terms now at this point. So, where's the righteous anger against him, who campaigned as a peace president, that's now ramping up the drone strikes on, the longest war in, if I recall correctly, in U.S. history?
Yeah. I mean, it depends how you count a war. But yeah, I would say Scott says Somalia is America's longest war. And really, because, I mentioned the 2006 invasion, but the Bush administration, started this right after 9/11. It was part of the war on terror, backing these warlords against these Islamist groups. And then, it led to this whole thing that we're still in now. So it's just a mess. And as I said, part of the story here is the fact that it doesn't get any media coverage. And I mean, recently, when they hit 100 airstrikes, there was like a report in Stars and Stripes, which they cover it once in a while. It's a military, I think it's funded by the Pentagon, but it's like a military focused outlet. And then
Unbiased
Fox News
source.
Yeah. They're actually better than some other places.
Okay.
Like Fox News' story was much more like, this is great. They had a story about it. But yeah, I mean, Drop Site News had some good reports about kind of some situation on the ground recently, some airstrikes, that I covered the day they happened because it was clear from Somali media that civilians were killed or whatever. And dude, sometimes, there's Somali media, like there's such little coverage at the Somali news sites that I check. There's been a few times where I go on there and they're like, oh, US launches, several days of airstrikes. And I'm like, oh, they're actually covering the US airstrikes. And I click on it and it's my article, like just reworded, like they ripped off me. I've seen it on at least 2 of them, actually 3 of them.
Wow.
That's how, because the English language, like Somali media outlets, like they're more aligned. I assume that they're aligned with the government. They probably, so, and the government that the US backs arrests journalists all the time for reporting critically on the war. So we just really don't know what's happening on the ground. It's like this, and in Al-Shabaab, they control the internet. They restrict internet in the areas that they control. So, we really just don't know what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, that's just awful. So I guess in other awful news, the president and Donald Trump had watched fireworks last night from Mar-a-Lago. And to go back to kind of messing with the plan trusters, I was told that Trump and even Charlie Kirk, who I was told had really opposed the strikes in private, had said publicly that Trump executed a master class strike on Iran. Um, I was told that the 12-day war was it, and he really stopped Israel because their planes were in mid-flight, and Trump stopped them, and he solved the war there, and it's all okay, and we're pulling out of the Middle East. But then yesterday or 2 days ago, he says, "Oh no, actually, we will commit to striking Iran's ballistic missile program now," which is a huge escalation from just saying they can't enrich uranium. So what the hell's going on with Iran, and what do you think this year's going to look like when it comes to US, Israel, and Iran?
Yeah, I mean, all signs right now are pointing to another war. I mean, you have Trump
Mhm.
just saying, "Yeah, I'll support it. Yep, whatever." Like, and that's what's funny is kind of Trump supporters are like, "Oh, he's not gonna give in to Bibi," or some people frame it like, "Oh, Biden, sorry, not Biden, Trump caved to Netanyahu," but it doesn't seem like he's caving. It doesn't seem like
No.
he's like putting up much of a fight. He's just like he said, if Iran continues its ballistic missile program, that then he's gonna support another attack. And there's no world where Iran is giving up its missiles. It's only deterrence or defense
Mhm.
against U.S. and Israeli attacks.
Right.
Then on the other hand, so that was at Mar-a-Lago. They spoke to the press before their meeting, and then afterward, he said, "Yeah, if it's confirmed, if they're building up again, we're going to hit them." So he was kind of making it seem like it wasn't confirmed, but again, just the fact that he seems so willing and eager to support this. And so what I think in Trump's mind is, he looks at the Soleimani assassination. He killed one of their top generals, and Iran didn't do much about it. They hit a U.S. base, but they gave them notice, and everything was all right. And then this war happened. Israel launched this massive attack. The U.S. came in with the B-2 bombers and blew up these nuclear facilities. Iran responded with some missiles again at a U.S. base, gave them notice, time to evacuate, time to intercept missiles. So Iran's not, we can hit Iran really hard, and they're not going to do much back, and that'll be that. So that's kind of, I think, Trump's thinking now. Oh, if it takes another war, yeah, whatever, it'll be quick in and out. But there's also, every reason to believe that it won't be that way the next time. Because look, what's the view from Iran? Okay, if there's another war, that means they didn't, establish deterrence with the US and Israel. Now we really got to hit them hard, give them everything we got, targeting the US bases that are right across the right across the water there, and hit them hard. So it's there's a real risk here of American casualties if he supports another war. And the question would be, so say it starts off in a similar way and it's Israeli jets doing the bombing, they would be supported by the US intercepting Iranian missiles and refueling and things. Would Iran just respond to that by hitting Israel, or would they hit US bases, or they only do that if the US directly intervene? That's kind of another question. But yeah, the whole thing, is just the demands of Iran are just not realistic. They're still demanding, you can never get your nuclear program back up and running. You got to limit your missiles, and those are just demands that Iran's not going to accept.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very bizarre to me to listen to the way that the Trump administration talks about this issue because Iran has always been, I don't want to say a paper tiger, but like they've been very agreeable with the US and they've been willing to work with them. Even up to, when Trump or throughout all of Biden's term, where they were pretty much saying, hey, just say you'll get back into the nuclear deal for this administration. We'll take, they're pretty much willing to take anything. But I like the way that you put it there that Trump never caved. He's always agreed with this because the way that people paint this, I call it like the alternative media, complex basically, where you have this whole podcast complex of people who insist that that basically Trump's Ron Paul, right? That he's coming back to save America. He's anti-war and this and that he would never commit to a war. And if something does happen that's bad, then it wasn't his fault. But it really seems like you said, that he's just like, yeah, we'll basically commit to another war with Iran. So it's just that throws out the idea that like the situation's handled. And anybody who knew anything about the situation knew that like, oh, if you bomb Iran, they're just going to go back to where they were, 6 months prior. So basically, you just kick the can down the road for a little bit longer. Trump's still got 3 more years to be president. So I like you said, I think this year they're going to go back to striking Iran. And how long can you sit there and poke them and be like, all right, what are you going to do this time? Or are they going to continue to give the U.S. warning? Like you said, who knows? Nobody knows. And do you think Trump's going to back down if he strikes it? If the Khamenei or whoever strikes a U.S. base, Trump's not going to back down. Like that's just going to make the situation way worse. And it's largely in the U.S.'s ball court at this point. But what are they going to do?
Yeah. One thing I will say is that I don't think Trump would want like a long drawn out war, which is why he left the last war at bombing the nuclear facilities and then a ceasefire, even though Israel was still getting hit pretty hard by those missiles.
Mm-hmm.
But so I do think his thinking is, oh, we can go in to bomb the hell out of them, and then that'll be that, and they'll be done, and they'll do whatever we want, or there'll be regime change or whatever. But I think that that it's not going to go down like that. I mean, especially in these days with drone warfare and things, I think it could be, even if it's just missiles and drones being fired back and forth between Iran and Israel. I mean, that could go for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess two more topics. I want to touch briefly on Gaza, and I want to ask you about China and Taiwan. So, what's the latest going on in Gaza? Because we were told that Trump ended the war there, even though I think by your reporting they've killed 500 Palestinians since the ceasefire went into effect. I can't remember the exact date. So, what's the latest there, and what do you think this year portends for that situation?
Yeah. So the death toll, according to the health ministry, is at 415 since the
Mm,
ceasefire started on October 10th. So almost 3 months. That's a lot of people to kill during a ceasefire. And, we've just seen Israel violated in every single way. The big problem with this current situation is that Israel still occupies a large chunk of Gaza, more than 50% of the territory. And a lot of the people get killed along the so-called yellow line, which is like the boundary separating the Israeli occupied side from the other. And at first, it was not marked at all. So you had people just walking, and then they get blown up and shot. They wouldn't stop them or arrest them; they just kill them. And then it's still not like clearly marked well, but they probably have a better idea of where it is now. But you see Israel pushing in some parts of it, expanding the yellow line to the west, taking more territory, and
mhm,
sometimes they kill people when they do that. Still launching airstrikes. And another thing that's happened is that there was a maybe 50 to 100, I forget the number, of like Hamas fighters trapped behind the Israeli occupied side. And Israel, which this is in violation of the ceasefire as well, they've continued their demolitions and things in the side that they occupy, because the ceasefire says that all military operations must cease, but they've continued that. And then these guys are in the tunnels. And, I know in one instance, like this is according to the Israeli reporting, a tunnel started collapsing and these guys just jumped out and started firing. And even the Israeli media admitted this isn't what Israel said or the U.S. said to the world, but Israeli media said that, there's no sign that this was a coordinated Hamas attack. It was basically these
mhm,
guys in a tunnel. It started collapsing. They jumped out and started shooting. In response to that, they launched, there's at least 2 or 3 days where they launched major strikes across Gaza and killed a few dozen people. And like, the way it goes, like half of them were kids.
mhm.
Um, so they're looking for excuses to do things like that. And according to the reporting and what basically Trump said when Netanyahu was here is that they've agreed on a deadline. The reports say 2 months. Don't know if that's exactly true, but basically a deadline for Hamas to disarm. And if they don't disarm by that deadline, then they're going to give Israel the green light to restart it. So, and the whole disarmament thing, it's being reported incorrectly as well. Like Trump says this, that Hamas has agreed to disarm, but that's not true. They've never agreed to that. They agreed that the 20-point peace plan that Trump put out was a good outline for talks. And then the deal that they signed, that they agreed on, established the hostage exchange and the ceasefire, and Israel allowing aid in and opening crossings, which Israel has violated just about all of that. But it didn't say, we're going to disarm. Their position has been they're not going to disarm unless there's a Palestinian state or movement in that direction. Now, they've said they could agree to some kind of 10-year ceasefire where they store their weapons somewhere, like a temporary. I don't know how that would work. So they might be flexible, but I just don't see this deal really coming together. And so I don't know. It's just not looking good for Gaza.
One other thing on the Israel situation that I want to get your thoughts on, the China-Taiwan thing, was you had a mildly viral tweet. I don't know if 200,000, 173,000 views is necessarily viral, but Batya Angar Sargon had mentioned something about you can't afford childcare and had talked about the taxpayer dollars going to the Somali daycares, which everybody's opposed to the fraud going on there. But it's funny how a lot of the people complaining about that don't mention, like you said, you can't afford a home, but Israel gets $8.6 billion of American taxpayer dollars for a fleet of new F-15s. So a lot of people had took you to task, say, oh, the justification for Israeli military aid is always, oh, well, we get this money back. Okay, can you explain why this whole line of thinking is just retarded?
Well, it's like they say, oh, we're not giving them away to Israel. We're giving them the money and then they buy them from us. So we get the money. But it's just like giving them, it's like handing them the jets. But, and a lot of people are also claiming that Israel's paying for it, which isn't true. And that's part of the reason why is because it wasn't reported correctly. The Israeli Defense Ministry announced this deal last year. It was initially valued at $5.2 billion. And then they added another 25 jets, and it's 8.6. When the Israeli Defense Ministry announced it, they said it's being funded by U.S. aid that was passed by Congress and authorized by Joe Biden. So, it's just you don't always get those details in the, write-ups that you see. But yeah, I mean, it's handing them this money because you're giving them the money to buy it. So it's just like giving them the military equipment. And Israel also does have some of the money. I forget the percentage, but they're the only country that gets what they call the foreign military financing that foreign countries use to buy American weapons. They get a percentage of that to buy weapons from other countries. So in some cases, that's not true. But when it comes to this deal, I mean, you talk about the Somali daycare, obviously, it's completely fine, and you're right to be outraged by that type of fraud, that type of scam. But I kind of was trolling that lady because she's very pro-Israel.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the numbers with Israel, I mean, it's just, we're off the charts here. And the things, it's not like they're just getting jets to park them somewhere. They're getting jets to bomb and kill little babies at a scale we have not seen in the 21st century. So, I'm just a lot more outraged at that. That was kind of my point.
Yeah, and it's so disingenuous because I even see people who I know better say, "Oh, Israel gets $3.8 billion a year." I'm like, no, they don't. They get way more than that. That's just what is originally budgeted for, but then they add everything else on top of that. So every time I see people say that, I'm like, "Oh my God, you can't be that fucking dense."
Well, that's what they get. I mean, that's the regular annual amount, and they've just gotten a lot of extra since October 7th, a lot, a few dozen billion more. And hundreds of billions over the years. But it's also, there's other things that, factor into U.S. aid, especially now that you have U.S. missile systems in Israel with U.S. troops operating them when they get attacked and intercepting missiles and stuff. So, yeah, the real cost is very much higher than that now.
So one last thing I wanted to touch on, if you can entertain me for a few more minutes, was the Taiwan situation because it was interesting to see Trump and Xi have a whole talk. I covered it on a show a couple months ago where I outlined basically the whole meeting. I think it was from like 11 a.m. to like 3 p.m. where Trump and Xi talked. It was the first time I've ever seen Trump get, like, as the kids would say, mogged by another leader, where Xi kind of seemed like he giga chatted Trump there, where Trump was seeming to be on his back foot against Xi, which is very odd. And the meeting seemed like it went really well, and the media covered it and said, "Oh, we didn't even talk Taiwan," which seemed actually good. Like they were trying to get things off on the right foot. But then the new national security strategy comes out and the NDAA comes out, and then they find out, oh, we're giving Taiwan, what is it, $13 billion of foreign military financing to buy US weapons. And of course, the Philippines is getting, what is it, $3 billion over the next 5 years. It just seems like everything that happened there was like same as Russia, where we have these talks, they want to maintain good relations, but then, hey, as soon as we're done, all right, everybody done? All right, now we're going to continue what we were doing before. So
Mm.
your thoughts on that?
So as I understand that Taiwan sale, it's over 11 billion, and Taiwan is actually paying for it or paying
Mhm.
for most of it. Trump did cancel some military aid to them last year because I know Elbridge Colby, who's running the Pentagon policy and the China stuff, his whole thing has been that Taiwan needs to pay more, needs to spend more. And I think Trump's been saying that as well. So Taiwan is basically, and Taiwan has a lot of money. And so they're, agreeing to buy this huge package of military equipment, probably to please the Trump administration. Um, but then you see what happened in response. China launched huge drills, blockade drills around
Just
Taiwan,
this week.
directly in response to those arms sales. I mean, they
Mhm.
made it very clear that that's why they were doing it. And as from what I've read, these were the biggest drills that they've ever done around Taiwan.
Mhm.
So they're sending a message, and the message is there's a few messages, but these drills at any time could turn into war. They could just say, okay, now there's a blockade, put everything in position. What is the US going to do? Are they really going to try to break that blockade? So that's a big message that they're sending to the US.
Mhm.
And I'm really hoping that these people understand that, yeah, we have no business trying to defend that island when China could just put it under blockade like that.
Mhm. Yeah, and then, as far as the Philippines go, it just $3 billion over the course of 5 years. I they said in the national security strategy that it seemed like they were trying to pivot over to Latin America, but, it just seems like that was kind of like in name only, where we're still gonna maintain our position in the Indo-Pacific because we still wanna fight a war with China because Elbridge Colby, Marco Rubio, but, we're still gonna focus on Latin America as well.
Yeah, I mean that thing did say, they're going to put more focus on this hemisphere
Mhm.
and try to make it the main focus. That seems to be their idea, but they're going to continue everything else. And China's number two, so they're going to continue all this stuff. I did think for a moment there that they realized that they couldn't draw the line at Taiwan, that they were going to back down a
Mhm.
little bit on Taiwan, and in some ways they did. But now then you see this huge arms sale. But this is one thing that's frustrating because I've seen like JD Vance say this. I've seen a lot of them say this. Stephen Miller said something similar, like, "Oh, for years we've been the police of the world. Deployed our military in fought wars in the Middle East and Africa and across the world, and now we're finally fighting in our own backyard, and everybody, permanent Washington is freaking out." It's like, well, you're still doing all the other stuff too. Like, you haven't scaled down anywhere
Mhm.
at all. In fact, you've escalated everywhere except for they're pulling a few thousand troops out of Romania or something.
Mhm.
So that whole talking point is just frustrating.
Nice. Well, I've kept you a little bit over. Why don't you give your plugs, Dave? I really appreciate all the work you do because, like I said, I use it in my show quite a bit, and of course, I think you're a invaluable asset to many, 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 many people. So, why don't you tell everybody where they could find your work, support you, and all that good
Yeah.
stuff?
First, thanks for that, and thanks for having me, and happy New
Mhm.
Year to you and everyone. Um, all my work's at antiwar.com. I write in the news section, and then I have a show called Antiwar News that you can watch on YouTube or Rumble or listen to the podcast. And follow me on X at DeCamp Dave.
Cool. All right, Dave. Well, as always, I appreciate it. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. I will see you all Sunday.